Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move that House File 1755 be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus.
Thank you. House File 1755 has been laid over for, has been moved, and we are being given now a first division engrossment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to briefly explain to the committee members the difference between the language as introduced in the first engrossment, it's really minor. There was an oral amendment that was added in Transportation Committee just to clarify that we're discussing specifically the buses that are operated by Metro Transit. Met Council has other bus and vehicles that are like buses that were not intended to be within the scope of what we're doing here. So in the Transportation Committee, there was an oral amendment to refine that further by adding a specific phrase linking it to Metro Transit. And you should see that in the first engrossment, which is being passed around. Member 1755 has a great opportunity to do something about carbon emissions in our transportation sector. During the course of this session, we've heard a lot about the climate crisis and the need to take aggressive action to curb carbon emissions in Minnesota. Well, thanks to our state's pioneering renewable energy standard, as well as the good work of our utility sector, most notably Xcel's recent announcement that they're going to be 100% carbon-free by 2050, electrical generation is no longer our state's leading source of carbon. And so we need to increase our focus on other carbon-emitting sectors and transportation in particular. The bill before you does just that by using renewable development account money to help the Met Council purchase electric buses to replace our current diesel fleet. RDA funds are appropriate because electric buses are going to assist Xcel with load management issues, by which I mean that the buses can charge when wind energy is plentiful at night and electrical demand is relatively weak. Replacing diesel buses with electrical buses will have a major impact on carbon emissions. Bloomberg recently reported that by the end of the year, electric buses will displace 270,000 barrels of diesel demand, which is more than 3 times of the world's electric passenger vehicles. Buses matter because of their size and their constant use. For every 1,000 electric buses on the road, 500 barrels of diesel are displaced each day, Bloomberg estimates. By comparison, 1,000 battery-operated electric vehicles remove 15 barrels of oil. In addition to the carbon emissions caused by our bus fleet, converting from diesel to electric improves air quality. MPCA says that air pollution causes 2,000 premature deaths every year. Recently, the Coalition for Clean Transportation, along with Twin Cities transit riders, canvassed transit riders to learn what they want from their transit system and found that improving health by reducing pollution is a critical concern. One rider said, "I have COPD, which is a chronic lung condition. I breathe in all the pollution from the bus every day." Another rider echoed the concern, saying, "My daughter has asthma, and when she's around pollution, her lungs get closed in. She always wears a scarf to cover her mouth." This bill also dovetails nicely with plans already in the works in Minnesota, as well as broader trends in the economy. In December, Metro Transit announced plans to start a transition to electric buses, and there's a great timing factor here. In fact, Metro Transit says 170 of their diesel buses need to be replaced in 2023 and 2024 alone. Furthermore, a report by Navigant Research, which is an international research firm, predicts electric buses will make up 27% of new bus sales in the United States by 2027. And finally, as you probably know, and as other testifiers will speak to, this bill has a high potential to create new jobs and sustain jobs right here in Minnesota, as the New Flyer company has an electric bus manufacturing facility in St. Cloud and another facility in Crookston. And with that, Madam Chair, I do have a couple of testifiers.
Yes, Representative Baker is going to wait for the testifiers if they would come up.
Mr. Pearson from Xcel is here.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jim Pearson, and I'm with Xcel Energy. I just wanted to comment a little bit in support of Representative Stevenson's bill. We, as a company, have worked with Metro Transit on a number of projects as they gain more experience with electric buses. And we have found through our conversations with Metro Transit that there's 2 main barriers. Both are capital barriers. One is the cost of the bus, which Representative Stevenson's bill addresses, and the other is the cost of the infrastructure in terms of charging mechanisms to make sure that bus barns and other places have the appropriate power to charge the buses when they need that charge. And so our focus has been primarily around that infrastructure piece, and working with the Public Utilities Commission to provide some options that would benefit Metro Transit on that chunk. And so when you take the work we're doing with the commission and add it to the bill that Representative Stevenson has, then you're really addressing two of the largest barriers. So we are in support of the efforts being made and would be happy to answer questions if the committee has them.
Thank you.
And then I believe Ms. Meyer is here from the communication.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Wigenius and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Mona Meyer, and I'm the president of the Communication Workers of America, Minnesota State Council. CWA represents 10,000 active and retired members in Minnesota, and I'm here today to speak in favor of House File 1755 on behalf of Local 7304, which are the New Flyer workers in St. Cloud and in Crookston. The world's leading scientific organizations have been very clear that climate change is a dire and urgent threat, and that the longer we delay, the stronger the action required. We believe there's a significant opportunity to create good-paying jobs in the state while adopting smart solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and avoid the worst impacts of a changing climate. We see House File 1755 as a smart solution that supports good-paying local jobs and reducing our greenhouse emissions. CWA Minnesota State Council supports purchasing more electric buses to help fight climate change, and we believe House File 1785 creates the opportunity for electric buses to be purchased from companies like New Flyer. New Flyer employs nearly 700 union members in St. Cloud and 300 members in Crookston. This is a diverse workforce that includes Latinx, Hmong, and Laotian employees. New Flyer workers start with a raw piece of steel and through approximately 1.5 miles of production line, create a top line bus that make up 40% of the bus fleets in North America. We want to thank Representative Stevenson for putting forth 1755 and giving us the time to share how our union members see their top line buses as part of the solution to reach our climate goals in Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a couple of questions now, Representative Baker and then Representative Bowe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the author, I kind of like the idea of more electric buses on the road. I think I've been on a few of them, and I really do actually like them. What's the difference between a average new bus now, diesel, versus a electric? Just a difference in price right now. Are they double, maybe, on average? Just I'm looking for just a roundabout number. I have a couple questions.
Madam Chair, Representative Baker, you know, it actually depends a little bit on the model and the size of the bus, but I've heard estimates as low as a couple $100,000, as high as $400,000 to $500,000 in additional cost. And again, when you say double, it depends on the base cost too. So there is an increase in cost. The amount of the cost really depends on a lot of factors. The bill, of course, is not prescriptive in that respect. It allows Met Council to buy whatever is best suits their needs.
And to that, Madam Chair, I think it was kind of stated by Mr. Pearson from Excel that it's probably the capital investment that is slowing that down by the Met Council, because I think this is a good bill to even not have that funding mechanism in it, just because I think it's a good idea. Met Council should just do that. But also I know that we keep diving into the RDA fund for a lot of good ideas, and I think that's kind of what we all are going to start sorting through at the end is what are the best ideas and how do we do this? My concern is I want to make sure that we as a committee then also recognize this kind of stuff and these kind of new investments, that they have to be part of the real cost of doing business and to these new ideas or expanding the electric buses. So I also would ask the question, we should, by rights to the ratepayers of Minnesota, if we're buying a lot more expensive buses in the future, that's going to affect the rates for the riders. Do you anticipate some of that changes coming because of that, so that everybody can help participate in sort of this movement to cleaner air? I think it's a reasonable question, but I just want to know your thoughts as an author. if we get a few buses like this, but going forward, do you think that should be something we should be looking at?
Madam Chair, Representative Baker, I think one thing that's great about transitioning to electric buses is that once you get past that initial capital cost, their operational costs are much reduced. And so I think actually the costs to people who are using the system and to taxpayers who finance that system and support that system over the long run will be reduced if we reduce the cost here. Obviously, the money that this bill contemplates is not sufficient to entirely roll over the bus fleet. And so there will be, if we're going to completely do that, we're going to have some additional costs coming from other sources.
And final question, Madam Chair, it sounds like you went through transportation already. Did the conversation come up with the MPCA about the recent Volkswagen settlement? And could there be funds used in that settlement that is there? Because I know there was a focus on busing and buses. So I'm just kind of curious if that is an option for funding instead of the RDA. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, Representative Baker, the conversation did not come up in the Transportation Committee that I recall about the Volkswagen settlement. I could be wrong, but I don't recall that. There was some discussion about the funding source. As I mentioned a minute ago, the money that's appropriated in this bill is not enough to entirely roll over the bus fleet that Met Council operates. And so looking at other sources in order to accomplish the overall goal of changing over to an electric bus fleet is going to be necessary.
Representative Bowe is next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions. First question is, I haven't heard anything about performance standards on buses, and I'm curious how much of a distance you can go between charges. I have this vision in my mind of a bus full of people suffering from range anxiety, and wondering how far can they go, how many miles, how many hours. Does it necessitate having to pull over and charge for a period of time, so you'd actually need more buses to continue to run a route and things like that?
Madam Chair, Representative Bowe, again, much like the cost consideration, the question of range really depends on the variety of bus you are purchasing. You can find buses that have ranges in the 100 to 200 mile space. You can find buses that have longer ranges. It depends. I think that Metro Transit has made it very clear that they are going to move to the electric bus space and that they've had those discussions about whether they can operate their fleet in such a way that they don't interrupt services. I take them, they're a professional organization. I was a bus commuter for many, many years. Buses run out of diesel too, and I never had the experience of pulling over the side of the road because the bus ran out of gas. So I trust in their expertise to manage whatever charging needs, just like right now they manage their fuel needs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secondly, are there any safety concerns? I hear that from people who have had issues with electric cars where they sneak up on them because they're so quiet, and I wonder if the same thing will happen on a larger scale with a bus.
Madam Chair, Representative Bowe, it's a new concern to me that the quietness of buses is problematic. I actually think electric buses will prove out to be safer in the long run. They have a lower center of gravity, which means that they will operate better in winter conditions. So I think they're actually safer. And as we already discussed, the air pollution that are caused by diesel buses is a big safety concern, contributes to many premature deaths around Minnesota every year.
Very good, thank you. And one final question, Madam Chair. What about the poor folks in the suburbs? This is all for Metro Transit and nothing for the suburban opt-outs.
Madam Chair, Representative Bowe, I live in the suburbs and we have Metro Transit service, so I guess I would disagree with your assertion that there's nothing for the people in the suburbs. Of course, this is using renewable development account money, and so we think it's important to stay within the XL service territory, which aligns pretty well with Metro Transit service territory.
There's a lot of folks in my district who are XL customers, but yet we don't have Metro Transit. We have Southwest Transit, a suburban opt-out, and so, they're a word in here for those suburban opt-outs. So just curious. Thank you.
Representative Mecklin.
Madam Chair, actually, I have an amendment. If we can move
Do I
that,
offer that now?
I would like to. And I would also, afterwards, I'd like to talk a little bit about New Flyer. I've actually toured it, and I think we could have some good conversation. My A1 amendment, if I may so do so, is to limit charging these buses when we're peaking on our renewable energy, rather than when we're peaking on our coal-based base load, if that would be something you would consider.
Madam Chair, regretfully, I think the amendment's unworkable and I would oppose it.
Representative Long.
Madam Chair, I oppose the amendment as well. Just if the goal is to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which it seems to be, and it would be a goal that I support, then the proper point of comparison is not coal to wind in terms of the generation. It's gas that the vehicles are using right now to whatever is being produced in the electric space. And gas vehicles only convert about 12 to 30% of the gas into moving the vehicle forward, whereas electric vehicles are much more efficient. They convert about 72 to 94% of the energy used into moving it forward. So even if you were to compare pure coal to gas, you're almost always going to get a better efficiency out of an electric vehicle. And when just looking at the Xcel territory, when you're charging electric vehicles on Xcel's system currently, where coal does exceed wind, there's still a 65% greenhouse gas reduction compared to using gas. So I don't think this achieves your goal, which I would imagine is greenhouse gas reduction.
There's an amendment before us, members. All of those in favor say aye.
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 The opposition say nay.
Nay.
The amendment does not pass.
If I may.
Representative
Madam Chair, so back to the New Flyer facility, if you haven't toured it, it is quite the thing. They do electric buses, natural gas buses, as well as diesel. And if you would like to tour it, I'd be more than happy to set up. They do reach out constantly to ask if we would be interested, and it's quite the learning process. And I think, as someone said, the process and how they move through there is something to actually see. And I do have a lot of friends that work there, so if you're interested. And actually, to Representative Bowe's concern, you can always invest in the natural gas buses. They have a longer range. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to second that, Representative Makeland. The Transportation Committee took a tour of New Flyer about a month ago, and very impressive. And I think it's important for the committee to know that they are really increasing their manufacture of the electric vehicles because they're in demand in other transit systems. California even has I think, a goal to have an entire electric fleet by 2029. But Representative Stevenson made, I think, the point that I wanted to make initially, and I'll just reiterate that while the sticker price may be a little bit more, there are significant savings in maintenance, significant savings in fuel costs. And then, of course, the externalities, which the chair has been very good at reminding me about, which is, those costs to our health and environment, as well as the climate. So I do think this is a smart investment, and I think there's a variety of funding sources. This is just one, but I think it's a helpful one, and I strongly support your bill. Thank you.
Representative Straczynski has the last comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a few questions about the bill. So just kind of in general, I think this is the only stop. Obviously, I'm not transportation. Maybe it could be referred to, but where does the money come from for the rest of the bus? So is it gas tax? Is it, what's the funding mechanism that Met Council uses for the rest of the bus?
I can tell you it is not the gas tax. The gas tax only funds roads and bridges.
And then, is there any thought to, Madam Chair, to the testifier, just from a higher cost standpoint? I think the reason why, this part of this is moving forward is to kind of lessen the cost to the Met Council. Is there any thought to, I've also often heard in this room that, hey, I'd gladly pay more for, green energy or whatever that might be, rather than just kind of create a pot to use. Any thought to creating kind of a revolving loan where you actually charge for the increased cost of this bus, and so that people, when they choose to get on that bus, that they could pay an extra amount above and beyond the normal rate that would go into a revolving loan fund that essentially the state could set up so that the Met Council could purchase more, so that the customers are actually paying for it, not just ratepayers, so essentially twice.
Madam Chair, Representative, it's an interesting idea, but I prefer this more direct approach, and I do think that the customers of Metro Transit will contribute to both the cost and the operation of the buses. So I would disagree a little bit with your characterization.
Okay, and then just one last, so from so let's say this didn't move forward, but the Met Council continued to maybe purchase, with a plan to purchase an electric bus. What is a current bus ride cost now? As a rural person, I don't know. And what would the increase cost be if there wasn't any public support for the increased cost of an electric bus? Like, what would that mean to the average, either what is the current subsidy, what would be the subsidy if it wasn't, and then what would be the current cost? I mean, is there anyone from the transit folks here that would be able to answer that?
Representative Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative, I don't know that there's anyone here who could answer the question. I can partially answer the first part of your question about does it cost. As I said, I was a bus commuter for many years, and it really depends on when you're riding the bus and where you're going, whether you're going in rush hour or on a local route or an express route. It very much depends, and also it depends on whether you are, for example, a veteran or a senior citizen, or if you are a monthly commuter. So it's highly variable, and so I think your question, your broader question is also a very complex one. I'm not sure that there's an easy answer to that one.
I'd love to be able to sit down with folks from the area there to talk about it, because I think that's important, because I think, as we're, this is essentially what this is getting after, and, looking at lessening the cost of the buses, deploying a different type of technology here and subsidizing it from a ratepayer standpoint, what that would mean, in the mix to the rest. And is there no one from the Met Council here to speak on this bill?
I don't think so. So can,
I'm done.
is that your last question? Representative Bowe has the last question, and we're going to lay this over.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not even a question, but just wanted to clarify. One of the questions that was asked a few minutes ago was where the dollars come from to pay for buses. And a good number of the dollars that come in to pay for buses comes from MVES, the motor vehicle sales tax, the purchase of vehicles. So I just wanted to clarify that question. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further questions. Representative Stevens renews his motion that House File 1755 be laid over for possible inclusion.